Thank you so much for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, growing concerns about the advancement of artificial intelligence and how it affects our world. We'll have the story, plus
a program that uses Bible education during school hours in public schools legally.
We launched in 2019, and it's been a whirlwind. We launched with 2 schools, but as of today, we're serving 133 schools across 4 states.
We'll show you how LifeWise Academy works. Then later, New York Times bestselling author Raymond Arroyo shares his latest book series, The Turnabout Tales.
What a turnabout tale is, it's that moment of crisis in a young person's life. It's that obstacle where they think all is lost, when it turns out that's the portal to their entire life, what they're called to.
All these stories and more coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN Newswatch.
We begin this half hour with the dangers of artificial intelligence. Some of those dangers include replacing millions of jobs, erasing key events from history, and jeopardizing national security. The threats are so ominous that one AI CEO is calling for government regulations. He warns artificial intelligence could cause significant harm to the world. Brody Carter has more in our top story.
My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world.
A surprise call for action from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, clarifying the dangers of tomorrow posed by the rapidly evolving technology of artificial intelligence. Altman wants lawmakers to step in and regulate it before it's too late, even calling for a government agency to oversee the industry.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong, and we want to be vocal about that.
It's been less than a year since ChatGPT was released to the world, and AI technology can already do so much more. From speechwriting and tutoring to machine learning, it can create new content such as music and art. It can even create deepfake video and audio. Senator Richard Blumenthal opening the hearing with a ChatGPT-generated greeting and audio app that impersonated his voice based on Senate floor speeches.
Too often, we have seen what happens when technology outpaces regulation. If you were listening from home, you might have thought that voice was mine and the words from me. But in fact, that voice was not mine.
So it's very important that we just take it a step at a time and develop it slowly so it doesn't ruin our lives as far as human life is concerned.
As lawmakers scramble to regulate AI technology, tech expert Burton Kelso tells CBN News that protecting yourself from this technology starts with protecting personal information.
So the thing that we have to worry about as individuals is making sure that we're not putting personal information in AI, because at any point, either through a supply chain hack or just a hack with OpenAI itself, then that information can be exposed to the dark web.
Some major fears include AI replacing millions of jobs. It could even falsify information for malicious gain or be used to erase key moments from history. However, one of the biggest concerns deals with national security.
Given that we're going to face an election next year and these models are getting better, I think this is a significant area of concern.
Rapid advances in AI tech are complicating efforts here and abroad to agree on laws that govern emerging technologies. China has already drafted regulations that could shape the future.
But at the same time, a lot of technology comes out of China. And I think one of the things that we want to prevent as a country is that China rules everything.
This is a remarkable time to be working on artificial intelligence. But as this technology advances, we understand that people are anxious about how it could change the way we live.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
With a debt deadline looming here at home, President Biden is in Japan on a shortened trip with world leaders, planning to come back to Washington earlier to hammer out a debt deal. Before leaving for the overseas meeting, he expressed confidence that he's able to make a deal with Republicans before the June 1st deadline. And we learned today Ukrainian President Vladmir Zelenskyy is expected to join the G7 summit on Sunday. CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has more.
President Biden will now spend just 4 days instead of the planned 8 overseas in Asia as he works to bolster support from U.S. allies during the annual G7 summit.
When our countries stand together, we stand stronger.
Biden kicked off the trip with a meeting with Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who told the president that the relationship between the two countries is a cornerstone of peace in the Indo-Pacific.
We face one of the most complex environments in recent history, security environments. And I couldn't agree with you more.
This year's G7 held in Hiroshima, the site of the first nuclear bomb drop by the U.S. in 1945 during World War II, a setting that carries renewed gravity as the two leaders affirm their continued commitment to supporting Ukraine as it defends itself from Russia's invasion, and discuss growing security threats from North Korea and China. Biden originally planned to visit Australia and Papua New Guinea's leaders as well while overseas, but those trips have been postponed due to the ongoing debt ceiling drama back home. Biden assuring the American people before taking off.
I'm confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget, that America will not default.
President Biden is reportedly negotiating with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and preparing to agree to some spending cuts which are concerning Democrats as the deadline to make a deal quickly approaches. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Abby, thank you. 56 years ago, Israeli paratroopers reunited a divided Jerusalem by capturing the old part of the city along with the Temple Mount during the 1967 Six-Day War. As Chris Mitchell reports, Thursday marked Jerusalem Day when Israelis celebrate that historic victory with a march where they wave their country's flag.
This is the main gathering for the flag march. From here, they'll go through the old city on their way to the Western Wall, all celebrating what happened in 1967, the reunification of the city of Jerusalem. During that Six-Day War, Israeli Colonel Matagor announced to the world, the Temple Mount is in our hands. It marked the first time in more than 2,000 years that the Jewish people were in control of their capital.
Actually, I was there in 67. I was a very young fighter, and at the end of the 7 days of the Six-Day War, they told us you can go home. The war is finished, and nobody went home. We went to our real home, to Jerusalem.
Former General Uzi Dayan witnessed the liberation of Jerusalem as a young soldier and went on to serve as National Security Advisor to two prime ministers.
It's very important today because what brings the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis together, actually Jerusalem.
Dayan's feeling was shared by many others.
We celebrate the unification of Jerusalem. At the same time, we celebrate the rebirth of the Jewish people coming back to Israel.
We commemorate the reunification of Jerusalem, which is a city older than years and years and years ago, from the days of King David. It's very, very important to the Jewish people.
We want to show that Jerusalem, first of all, is an open city to all religions. This is a wonderful country, open to everybody.
This year's march came just days after Israel fought a 5-day battle with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, who fired more than 1,400 rockets at Israel. Despite threats by Hamas that if the march went through the Muslim section of the old city, they would retaliate, the march went ahead as planned. And despite minor scuffles between some marchers and Palestinians and members of the media, the event was mainly peaceful.
We are talking about patriotism, we're talking about love of our city, which has been the centerpiece of our religion and our people for thousands of years.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And you can see more news from the Middle East Bureau with Chris Mitchell and his team on the CBN News channel at 8:30 Eastern this evening. You can also watch on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Be sure to check out Jerusalem Dateline. Coming up, see how a special program has been legally utilizing Bible education in public schools during instruction hours. Stay with us. You're watching CBN Newswatch. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBN Newswatch. There is a new solution to utilize Bible education for public schools. Joel Penton, the founder and CEO of LifeWise Academy, says there is a little-known law that could be the greatest missed opportunity of the American church to reach the next generation. He's the author of the book called During School Hours, Why and How LifeWise Academy is Reinstalling Religious Education into the Public School Day. He talked with CBN's Faith Wire's Billy Hallowell about how LifeWise Academy works.
So, Joel, I want to dive right into LifeWise Academy. This is your organization, and it's incredibly unique for a variety of reasons, helping public school kids learn about the Bible during the school day. Tell us a little bit about your work and how you got started.
Yeah, well, you said it. It's Bible education for public school students during school hours. We started in 2019. We were inspired by a program that started in my hometown. In 2012, people in my hometown started what's known as a released time religious instruction program. Very few people are aware that in 1952, the Supreme Court ruled that public school students can be released from public school during school hours to attend religious classes if the program meets three criteria. If it's number one, off-school property, number two, privately funded, and number three, with parental permission. It was ruled on in 52. Now 26 states in the nation have laws about release time, but very few people are aware of it. In my hometown, they found out they could do this, and so they launched a program, started holding classes in a renovated home next to the elementary school. Their goal was to have 30% of kids sign up because that's how many kids go to church. But to their surprise, the very first year, 60% of kids signed up. And by year three, 95% of the kids in the entire public elementary school were enrolled. And so then in 2018, they reached out to me. I'm from the town. It's called Van Wert, Ohio is the name of the town. And I was leading a ministry to public school students. It was a traveling speaking ministry. But they said, Joel, help us answer the question how we can have this wonderful program that's entirely legal, that's incredibly impactful, but there isn't a program like this in every community coast to coast. Why hasn't everyone heard about this? We recognized all the so many barriers to entry to get a program off the ground. And so we launched in 2019, and it's been a whirlwind. We launched with 2 schools, but as of today, we're serving 133 schools across 4 states.
133 schools across 4 states. And the logistics of this, is it one time a week that students come to these offsite areas? What's sort of the logistics of this?
Yeah, good question. It does tend to be once a week, and you can think of it as it's normally part of the specials rotation. So in the same way that a kid will get art class once a week, maybe gym class once or twice a week, library, they'll have an opportunity as part of that weekly rotation to attend a Bible class, LifeWise Academy in our case. And so then we'll rotate students through. It's usually 1 or 2 classes at a time are released to our facility. And so we have a program, for example, now in Northwest Ohio, that there's 1,000 students in the elementary school. There's 900 students in LifeWise. And so it's 2 classrooms at a time, 5 times a day, 5 days a week. Kids are rolling through. We pick them up on the big red LifeWise bus, take them to the YMCA where we teach them the Bible, bring them back and pick up more kids.
So this is not just a one-time, here's a big group of, here's 30 kids, 50 kids coming one time. This is going on continuously to make sure there's enough room for all the kids in that community who want to do this. 900 kids. Yeah. So you're in 4 states. What states are you in right now?
Right now we're in Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. However, we're already confirmed with written approval from superintendents to be in over 260 schools next year in more than 10 states.
Do you ever hit, because obviously people, the confusion over the separation of church and state really confounds a lot of people, and it leads them to say things like, well, this can't be legal. And do you hit those roadblocks with schools initially before they understand what the law actually says?
Well, we hit it with everybody. I mean, there's probably people listening to this right this moment that still, even though we've said during school hours about 5 times, they're still thinking this is a before or after school program. That's what we find, is that we might say it 20 times and still at the end, someone raises their hand and says, is this before or after school? Because we've been so programmed to think of this separation of church and state, which we think means kids can't learn the Bible during school hours. And it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, release time, what we do is a beautiful manifestation of the concept of the separation of church and state, and that students are literally removed from the state school in the middle of the school day, and they're separated from it physically. But usually the resistance we get is just people not understanding on the front end. So maybe not even hearing it because we've been so programmed, so not understanding what we're saying, and then having the misconception that, oh, that must not be legal. However, it's simply a matter of printing off the Supreme Court ruling from 52 or one of these 26 laws specifically about this practice. And people start to wake up, and a lot of Christians start to have the same response I had, and that is, how have I never heard of this? This seems to be the greatest missed opportunity of the American church to reach the next generation.
You can get more information on this initiative in his new book called During School Hours, Why and How LifeWise Academy is Reinstalling Religious Education into the Public School Day. It's available wherever books are sold. Still ahead, we're going to sit down with author Raymond Arroyo as he shares a new book series that educates students in a creative way. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBN Newswatch. New York Times best-selling author and journalist Raymond Arroyo is sharing a new book series. It's called The Turnabout Tales. It's the story of one of America's most famous inventors, Thomas Edison. That's the way the series begins. It is the real-life tale of how a small spark can create a big light. When no one thought much of young Edison, his mother saw imagination and curiosity that he could do anything. The first book in the series is called The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison. The series is called Turnabout Tales. What inspired the series before we get to the first in it?
I find with kids, they can't focus on a womb to tomb biography. So I thought, how do I frame this? How do you focus it? And what a turnabout tale is, it's that moment of crisis in a young person's life. It's that obstacle where they think all is lost, when it turns out that's the portal to their entire life, what they're called to. And that's what happens in each of these turnabout tales. The first being Thomas Edison, the unexpected light of Thomas Edison.
I like that, the unexpected light. So what's Thomas Edison's turnabout, if you will?
In second grade, Edison is registered in a school, and the schoolmaster says, he's addle-brained and cannot be taught. He's thrown out of school. He runs home in tears to his mother. His mother drags him back to school and says, my boy has more intelligence and curiosity than even you, and I'll take him home and homeschool him myself. He was homeschooled by his mother. She accompanied him, fed his passions, gave him books to read from literature to scientific and electric manuals, but most importantly, she allowed him to experiment and tinker, to play with acids and electricity and build telegraph lines around the house. He blew up the basement, he burned down the barn, but that's part of exploration and growing. And all of the things he learned from his mother, in his own words, and the reason I came to this was, there's a line he said in old age, my mother was the making of me. And if it had not been for her, I should never have become an inventor.
What particularly inspired you? Was there a connection between the two of you that you felt?
When I saw that line about his mother, that his mother was the making of him, I wanted to explore that more. And I thought, you know, this is a great reminder for all of us. And this is what history does. It furnishes us not only with great stories, but lessons that we can take into living. And this is about parents and mentors accompanying a child in their passion and not allowing others to define who they are or who they're meant to be. And I thought that story was worth telling.
Tell me about his mom. I mean, I imagine there's more you found in research. I mean, she seems to have been a really special person and an encouragement to other mothers today.
A mother of 9, a woman who, lived in multiple places, a trailblazer in many ways. But she was an educator. She was a teacher in Canada. So education was not foreign to her. And she used all of that training and poured it into her son, the only one who was in the house at the time. But certainly he talks about the training, the intellectual training his mother gave him, how to read a book deeply and quickly, and how to incorporate different types of writing, both literature as well as scientific journals and philosophy and politics. He read it all. He was presented it all from 9 years old and onward.
Your hope for this series is that children and parents will be reading this?
Well, my whole hope for every time I write for kids, I hope parents and mentors and teachers read with kids, because the synapses of a child's mind begin to fire and grow in the reading. When you hear an adult, and particularly someone who cares for you, read to you and you read to them, And there's the exchange of not only information and wisdom, but values, sensibilities that you get around a book that you otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity for. So my hope is every Turnabout Tale reminds a child that obstacles are just turns for you. They're moments of inflection when your life begins, not when it ends. I mean, we are still warmed by the creations, the innovations of Thomas Edison, from the light bulb to the alkaline battery to the electric grid. All of these things were created almost a century ago, if not a century ago, by a child who was written off as unable to do very much of anything. And look what he did.
Sounds almost biblical.
Yeah, it is biblical. God hath chosen the weak to confound the strong, and the foolish to confound the wise. I've inverted the line, but that's it. And when you see a life like Edison, it reminds us of that. Don't write people off. And it's sometimes important for parents to see that light in a child, even when no one else does, because they might be the next Edison. And who are we to deprive the world of that?
And you can grab that book wherever you purchase your book. Stay with us. Your Friday Faithful is coming up next. It is time now for your Friday Faithful, and here's a thought to consider as we wrap this week together. When you fall on your knees to pray, make your prayer that you would be the answer to someone else's prayer. God, make me, shape me, mold me to fill a need in someone else's life. I want to be a divine presence in their life. With that word, I encourage you to make today a fabulous Friday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful weekend as well. Get some rest. I'm sure it's much needed. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us. That address is right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly would love to hear from you. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time, Monday. Goodbye and God bless.